Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Open Shed podcast. I think it's episode 3, if my calculations are correct, but it's just Dad and I at the minute. I don't know, the other guys are just off doing their own thing. We're the faithful few.
They don't like the camera.
No. Or,
None of us like it.
No, No, it's an adjustment, that's for sure. And even the podcasting is a whole new world, isn't it? Talking to yourselves, but everyone's listening, and yeah, it's scary.
I think I said to you after the first one that I didn't want to do it, but if you read some of the comments, for some reason, some people have been encouraged. So I think for that reason, I felt that it was worth doing again, even if one or two was helped. But it was interesting when we were walking into Equip, Phil was just saying to me, "Dad, this is not right. You know, we're here, we're all dressed up." And I said, "Yeah, we're like imposters, aren't we?" He said, "Yeah, we're frauds because everyone thinks we're something, but we're not. No. You know, we just don't understand why what we do is so interesting for people." So, and I think while ever that's our attitude, it's probably safe, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's a challenge. Like I still don't understand, the support and the people that are interested in what we're doing. Like I'm just pointing a camera at things and talking, and it's taken a long time to get half comfortable. But yeah, like that it is, and that's hard with the like Equip or doing meet and greets. It's like there's nothing special about us, but we understand that people have invested their time in watching the videos, and they're invested in what we're doing, and they enjoy it. And to come and say good day in a controlled fashion is quite nice and
encouraging.
And it's encouraging to us because we don't see a lot of that. We get the comments, but you don't see that face-to-face contact of just that people are really enjoying what we're doing. So, it is. It's very encouraging.
And someone sent me a birthday card that they'd pulled snapshots off the videos, obviously, and put it on photographic paper and sent me a card.
Paul and sorry, I forgot her name. Carol? No, it's Hadfield.
Yep. Yeah.
They keep in contact in the comments a bit. That was that's a really good interaction. But anyway, we've already off to a terrible start with keeping on topic, aren't we?
But this is what we're good at. Maybe this is what people like. You just don't know what you're going to get. Neither do we. Well, where's the script, Matt? Where's the agenda?
Yeah. Well, I generally, it's just like the videos though. It's so hard. Like people will, like a lot of channels obviously have an idea and make a video about that idea.
They're organised.
But here, making videos, it's kind of easy because the content makes itself. But I don't know the title until after the video's edited because you just don't know what's going to happen. But
a good one would be Dad with Dementia.
Yeah, well, and tying into what we were talking about before, one of the reasons I want to do this is, your memory's going to fade one day, as is all of us.
It's going already.
And so this episode, we're going to loosely try and follow a theme of history, probably starting with you growing up in the Mallee, and we'll probably see how far we get. But and we recognise that obviously your take on the stories and the memories, like your brothers and sisters will all have different ones too. But
I was an eyewitness to what I saw, and others see what they see. But and the best I can tell, the gist of what I'm saying is true. The details might be lost, but
in saying that, there's not like any stories.
No,
there's no issues with your siblings.
They're not made up. They're not lies.
No, there's no issues with that. But it's just it is hard, and it is a long time ago too. So, but we might even, who knows, might even be able to get your brothers on here one time.
That'd be good, and even my sisters, they wouldn't be game.
Jackson brothers.
They wouldn't be game, but well, there's 3 generations, isn't there, of Jackson brothers?
Well, you 3 boys. And us 3 boys.
And then Phil's got 4 boys.
I got 2 now, and Brad's got 1.
Yeah.
So, no, and but yeah. So anyway, we're taking our time.
As a disclaimer, I read somewhere just the other day that ageing tends to happen more rapidly at about 44. There's 2 stages, and about 60. And I noticed when I was 60 that I could see deterioration in myself, and I think self-awareness is so important to be able to judge yourself before you wait for others to judge yourself. So I can see, I feel like I'm ageing much more rapidly than many of my peers, and there's not often a lot you can do about that, like with diabetes and other health issues that we all face, like and brain fog and all that. It's the cognitive ability at times is just not there.
And it is important, like, and if we can sort of document some of these stories, like there'll be episodes of different parts of history tied in. There'll be D11 episodes probably talking about all sorts of whatever. But just that you're heading to the snow, so I thought you're going to be off for a week, and I thought we're due for a podcast, so I'll just nab you and get going. So
and everyone likes a puzzle, you know. When you start off on a bush track, you just don't not quite know where you're going to go, do you?
yeah. Well, that's us in a nutshell, isn't it? So, starting with, you were born back in...
the 5th of the 8th, 59, in a dust storm at 4:15 in the afternoon in the Mallee, a little place called Underbull. Took me to hospital. That's what my mum told me I was notable for, being born in a dust storm. The Mallee had good dust storms back then. A lot of clearing.
Clearing and cultivation and all of that.
My grandfather he had 3 or 4 brothers, and his father he bought a sawmill in Dalesford, and it was a handshake deal, and the previous owner said, well, anyway, he lost everything he had because there was no documentation. And so then my grandfather, his father died when he was 13, and then so he cruised around a bit, different parts of Australia and over to New Zealand, I believe, and then came back and went up to the Mallee in Victoria with his 3 brothers and helped. He was the oldest, and he helped them all establish their farms, and then he got his going because his father had said to him, look after the family. And that was a big deal, you know, the word and commitment was such a big deal in those days. And he saw that through, and my dad said that he was my grandfather was at the funeral of his last brother, and at the graveside he said, well, Dad, I did what you asked me to do.
No, and that was at different times too, like it was very, like a lot of the time all you had was your word, and even with, you know, losing the sawmill and that, like, you know, you'd love the world to work on just your word, wouldn't you? And as much as you can, it's nice. But
that's a genetic trait that's flowed through to me.
Yeah, you're a bit too cavalier with It's a hard one. You have to these days. You just have to cover yourself, and it's unfortunate because there are people that don't have honest intentions, but. It is very nice when you can do business with people that you know they've said something and they're going to follow through no matter the cost.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of people that you love and you try to seek out to do business with, isn't it?
Yeah, I like to give everyone the opportunity, and I treat them as I'd like to be treated. If they prove that your faith was unfounded, I'm certainly more cautious the next time with that person, unless they address the issue and say, well, look, I got that wrong, I'm sorry, then that's different. But...
So then your grandfather had to clear a lot of the mallee.
Yes.
Like and the mallee tree, for those that don't know, is sort of the branches come out of the ground and the stump / trunk is kind of buried in the ground, isn't it?
It's a bit like a rough-looking onion, with big bulb under the tree and very fibrous and knotty and gnarly, and then, you know, 3 or 4 stems, maybe half a dozen. How many bushfires took the top off? It sprouts from the bottom again, and.
So very hard work. A lot of it was done with axe and crowbars and just by hand. So he was a small fella, but he was very very wiry, very very strong.
My dad said that he could, the old leather bootlaces that they used to tie up their boots with, he could tie it around his bicep and break it just by clenching his fist, clenching his arm.
We're a little way away from that, aren't we?
Ah, yeah. Oh,
Too much air conditioning and suspension.
Oh, that's me. I like living through previous generations.
So then that was at Underbull. Then your father, my grandpa, Jim was, at Underbull there, had the farm there.
Yep.
Which is still in the family. Uncle Neil's got that.
He was the oldest of the surviving siblings. So there was 3, maybe 4. Anyway, 3 or 4 died. Somewhere between 3 weeks, I think. This is where my memory's not accurate. But
this is your grandpa, not your brother. This is your dad, not your brother, sorry.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way I worded that, it sounded like got confusing. So your father's was the first of surviving child, yeah.
Yes. There was 3 or 4 before him that died between the ages of 3 weeks, I think, and maybe 18 months. But look, I might be wrong on those numbers, but there's definitely, he was the first survivor. So it would have been, he was number 5, and he survived. And then he had my Uncle Tom after that, and then Auntie Naomi. So, but he was, they reckon Grandma's milk was no good, and I don't know the truth of that or whatever, but the bush nurse advocated that they bring him up on Nestle condensed milk, and Dad was the one that they did that on, and they survived. So for whatever reason, and so.
And then he obviously took over farm duties. You grew up. You were born you're number 5.
Yes.
And so you're the youngest of the 3 brothers, and you have one younger sister.
Yep.
So you growing up, did you always have the passion, like from a young age, can you remember, of like farming was just, or were you too sort of preoccupied having fun on motorbikes and tractors and stuff that the actual farming itself, growing things wasn't there, or how did that come about?
I probably haven't changed a lot in the sense that whatever I'm doing is the most important thing going on.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. That's still true today.
So I was too busy making history to be interested about learning about it. Like I seem to have to be fairly active. So Neil will love me for saying this, but he did like a bit of a sleeping in the morning, and I remember Dad having a bit of a struggle getting him out of bed sometimes when he was on the farm. But I knew I'd never get on the land. That just never happened, where the youngest brother ever got a shot at farming. But maybe it was a goal unachievable, I don't know. But Saturdays I'd try and find out what was going on, or Friday night, and I might be up at 6 or 6:30 just fiddling around trying to get machinery hooked up that I knew was going to be needed. And I never really thought it was going to be a possibility of being on the farm. But I'm not even sure that I was interested as such. It was just something going on. But I think it did develop into something. And maybe I didn't let myself think that way. So I did it when I was 17. I did an apprenticeship at a little town called Walbyup. It was a Massey Ferguson dealership. Barry Byrne was the principal. And I did that apprenticeship and finished that in 81. And then because of my dad had decided that he felt that he was too comfortable for God to use him and for him to be of any use to others. When you haven't got your butt on the razor blade, it's very easy for you not to feel the pain of others. And I think he felt that he needed to be able to identify with people who struggled. And he certainly struggled, but he told me that just a few days or weeks before he died. He cried himself to sleep when he moved up here.
So it's about 12-hour drive from
1,200 k's,
the original farm to here, and there was other family here on your mum's side.
Yeah.
So that was it wasn't just a complete out into the wilderness, but it's a totally different landscape, totally different farming practice, and a long way from comfort, I guess. So.
And I think part of the main motivation that Dad had was probably principally to he was asked if he would help start up a little Christian fellowship locally, and so that happened, and the farming side of it was a facilitator to be able to do that. So my dad wasn't a pastor or a noted preacher or anything, but he was a lay preacher. So he grew up in the it's now the Uniting Church, but Methodist Church, and he was a lay preacher when he was 16. He'd go to neighbouring towns and preach as a 16-year-old. But he had a heart for God, and that came from, you know, another story, yeah.
And the original plan was Uncle Neil was going to come up here, but there was other circumstances, just life things happening, that it suited better for him to stay down there on the original farm. Yeah.
Yeah, well, his wife Kathy was quite young, and they just felt that a little more time at home there with the parents would be helpful to her. And but the intent was always within a couple of years to come up here, and I came up as a caretaker, I guess, and I was happy and willing to have any chance at being on the farm. I didn't choose to be here. It was really other people's choices that meant that I was here, but I was happy to stay down there. But
and Uncle Ian was here for a bit too, did a bit.
Yeah, well, he went to a Bible school in Tasmania when that was that transition was happening, and so yeah, he helped out with his savings to help get the move made. But his goals or his whatever end game ended up in different direction. So he went from Bible school too, and then he with some others started up some little fellowships over on the coast.
And it's good though. He comes back. People would have seen in the videos. He comes back, and it's good having him around when he comes.
And he loves.
He's a gentler, nicer version of you. I think we can say.
Very much so. Very much so. I think people say that my mother will never be dead while I'm alive, and my dad was quite a gentle, soft, easygoing guy. Although one person did tell me when he was a young fella he could be a hothead. So I think a lot of us blokes tend to mellow a bit. But
So that brings us to this farm. Now, there was no sort of property lined up when the decision was made to move, was there? There was a few options maybe, but it was
and my brother Neil has the details. Actually, he sent me up, or his wife Kathy sent me up some recollections of that time, and if it had been organised, I could have had that sheet in front of me, because that's probably a more accurate account.
We can make it up. Just say as I remember in front of everything.
Yeah. So what was the question?
Oh, just with the property, like it wasn't like it was an easy just there's a property.
No, I think
it was kind of move and then find something. I
think that was it. There was some that were looking at, and Neil was involved in that. They were looking at different properties as what might suit, and there'd been two or three. As I recall, this property came up in the morning, and my dad and Neil must have seen it advertised, came out and had a look, and accepted the offer on the day or thereabouts.
But it had only just come on the market.
Only just come on the market.
And there was
a matter of hours.
A lot of people that it was fairly desirable.
Yeah.
A plot, so that was kind of very.
I think there was some locals disappointed that it hadn't stayed locally and actually got taken up by foreigners, because Victorians are foreigners.
Yes. Yeah. Now it's weird because you have that same attitude to them all down there now, don't we?
No, they're one of my mates. They're my brothers.
No. So you first you brought up the old comma.
Yep.
That's the old the brown comma.
That was a Bricky's truck, and had a little trailer on the back of it, and came from Adelaide. Neil was right into that. He got that organised, bought that because we were all in together, and that came up.
And you had the 4480 Chamberlain on the back of that?
No.
Did you?
No. Later on, a few months later, the 9G came up on the back of that, maybe a year later. Maybe.
So that's the 9G that people will see on the fuel trailer now, that yellow...
The orange...
The orange tractor, but the yellow, the white. What am I talking about? The white fuel trailer.
Yeah.
It's at the development block, and your father bought that brand new when you were a
5-year-old.
Yes.
So 1964, and I really learnt to drive on that.
And do wheelies and.
Oh, we did some terrible things.
Another time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then so that came back up. So basically it was just the 9G on the back of the comma. And what else did you start off or bring up?
We bought the 4480 here. I think it had 2,800 hours on it. It was second hand. And then a stubby trash worker. So 13-tine trash worker, 12-inch spacings. And a gyral power planter. So that was a 20-foot thereabouts close bar, 4-bar. It was a cultivator, but it was it couldn't handle a lot of trash. So you had to do your primary working up with your trash farmers or your chisel ploughs, and then you'd come in and fine it up, ready for nice seed bed. And that had a distributing head on it that was both an air, a fan, and a centrifugal. The grain would come down the middle, and the fan would throw the grain out.
But also
one big head
produce air to blow them down the tube as well.
Yep. And they were just inch poly pipe going from that head, so 20 or 28 of them coming out and going down to each tube.
And they're an Australian. The air seeder itself is an Australian kind of invention.
I think that's
thing,
right.
And they sort of started with that, and then the next gyrals they had more of your traditional fan. And then you had that. So it was basically the 4480 Chamberlain with the power planter and the little chisel plough.
And that was it.
And there was a lot of rocks still.
And trees.
And there was a lot of mucking around, but the soil being basalt, decomposed basalt, and that it's very very rich too. So
very desirable.
It was able to really punch out the produce.
We have about 3 feet or a metre of topsoil available on most of the country here. So it gave you enormous moisture storing capacity. If you got rain, it could absorb up to 6 to 8 inches of rain in the soil and then release it back through the crop growing cycle.
And too, if you've got, and we've mentioned it in videos too, but what's really unique too is because it is cracking soil, if it's really dry and you get a massive storm, it fills from the bottom. It all goes in the cracks and fills from the bottom. Now, the downside of that is when it does start drying out and then cracking, the air gets down and dries it out more. But usually you've got a crop in sort of protecting that anyway. But it's it is fun. It is different, a different area, and the ability to grow a summer or winter crop. It's very unique. This little area. So.
And a 24, 25-inch rainfall, it's pretty safe getting at least one crop a year somewhere or other.
So it's very different to the sand in the Mallee, because that's predominantly down there, and what you would have grown up with.
I think they'd prefer down there to call it loamy soil. We don't call it sand.
Yeah, righto. I'll keep that in mind. But it's great in that you don't seem to have. It's not the same intensity, but you can still get some like grain off, can't you? Like it's a different game.
I think since they've gone to zero till, it's really helped enormously because they've got sand hills running east-west. They might raise an elevation by maybe 10 to 15 metres, and every 300 or 400 metres, maybe less than that. My recollection of this mightn't be, but they all run east and west, and they can run east and west for 10 to 15 k's, just one little sand dune through various properties, and in between you've got, and there was more sand, and then in between you'd have often red heavier soil, and when I was there, they used to plant barley and rye and triticale on the hills, and your wheat in the bottom, in the heavier soil. Now with the zero till, they tend to I think they just go straight up and over.
But the lighter soil too, and we've got patches of lighter soil here too, but they can really utilise 5-10 mil of rain. And what we noticed in the drought, the worst year of the drought was 19, wasn't it? 2019. Yep. On some of the lighter country, we got a crop, like terrible, like 2-3 bag crop maybe. But a lot of the good soil didn't produce anything, and part of that was even in the drought, you'd get heavy dews, you'd get 5 mil of rain every so often, and the lighter soil can utilise that. Whereas with the heavier Heavier soil, you need probably at least, 10, 12 mil or more sometimes?
Maybe if you'd had a rainfall event the week before, it might help. But if it was isolated on its own, it'd just lock up the clay particles, it'd lock it up in that top half inch and it wouldn't go anywhere. Whereas the sand...
It'd evaporate before the plant used it.
The sand, I think, I remember saying to Neil there a year or two ago, I think 10 mil easily gets them going for planting. Sometimes 6 or 7 mil, they can plant a crop and get it out of the ground.
Whereas that here is very dicey.
No, you wouldn't do it.
It'd be dry sown.
You would wait. You would hold off on a 5 to 6 mil forecast because it'll put you in no man's land. If you want a deep sow, you want it no rain coming so it doesn't collapse the furrow behind you and smother the seed. And if you're dry sowing, you want it.
You don't want to drown the seed. So it's a science or guesswork.
Yeah.
So then I guess we're ploughing through. We're doing a pretty brief summary of the history so far, aren't we? So
yeah.
That's good. We're ploughing through. Where are we up to?
I don't know.
We're nearly half an hour.
Gee, it goes quick, doesn't it?
So then you had then you replaced the power planter with another gyral.
A TG gyral.
So that was a wider one.
It was not much wider. It had to be able to...
6 metres or something, wasn't it?
21 feet. But we had to be able to pull it with the 4480 Chamberlain because we couldn't afford to upgrade the power plant. That was prompted because up till then, everyone, conventional wisdom said that you didn't need to fertilise in this country because it was just kept giving and giving and giving. But in our first few years, the yields were just not there. Because our crops weren't yielding well, we weren't using the moisture out of the soil. So when we'd put our probe after the harvest, 2 inches of rain would give us a full profile again. So we'd say, well, let's plant a summer crop. So we'd plant a summer crop, and that wouldn't yield very well either because we weren't using the moisture. The nutrition wasn't good enough. So I remember saying to Dad, I said, I don't want to find out whether I'm going to be a farmer in 20 years. I said, I want to know in 2. And the ag departments were telling us that we were low in N and possibly P. And a lot of my peers in the area are saying, well, it's just chemical companies trying to make a profit selling you this stuff. And I said, well, that may be. But one thing's for sure, if we keep going the way we are, it's death by 1,000 cuts, living off depreciation. And so I said to Dad, I want to get out there and have a crack. He said, all right, son. So he backed me, and that was a big thing. Like, I was 23, knew diddly squat about anything, but...
It's a theme that runs in the family. Go hard or go home. And you didn't want to sit around and wait. And that's the same mentality, I guess, as a bit of a transition into... with the dozers. So the first D11, 21, was you had the reins basically then, or you still had... I
had veto.
You had veto power then. Wasn't long after that you stepped down. But that was the same thing because the drought hit us very hard and we're still trying to recover, basically. There's 3 years of virtually not making...
No income.
An income or nowhere near enough to... cover costs, and that obviously eats into equity, and then there's years and years and years to claw your way out, and that's the whole thing with the D11s. They provided an opportunity to help with that, plus the development block has that's the sort of reasoning behind that. But
it was cost effective, and probably from my point of view, it was more not so much about the profit, but having something to do, because there's nothing as debilitating as sitting watching crops die, nothing happening, and nothing to do, and just you get depression gets to you. That got to me anyway, towards the end of 19 anyway, for whatever reason. I'm not sure how much of it was to do with the drought. It was probably other factors, but
it was like you don't think about it at the time, but when you look outside and everything's just brown, your grass is dead. Everything's brown, everything's dusty, there's dust storms coming through, there's no crop, there's not a lot I mean, there's always stuff to do, but it's really yeah, it does affect you mentally.
I think Phil might have he might have initiated the thinking towards the dozer. They all had a hankering for earth moving, and I think at some point I said, well, I think he might have started that thought process, and I said, well, we haven't done any maintenance on our banks or contours for 10 years. This is what you can do in a drought if we get a dozer. So we were sort of thinking of D9. Or I think Phil was thinking that way, and I sort of couldn't get my head around that. And then one day he said, Dad, there's a D11 advertised down Dubbo Way. It's $228,000. Got multi-shank rippers, SU blade. And that triggered me.
Once you... Well, and the thing is that, and again, I didn't mean to delve off into the dozer talk like that, but we might trail back to where we were. But that dozer, once you actually crunch the numbers and compare a D9 to a D11, now there's downsides, obviously. With size comes difficulty moving, increase in... arguably, maybe not, but you've got different maintenance costs. You've got higher pounds per square inch on the ground. You've got all these things, but the big one is you can just get so much more done with a D11.
With one driver.
With one driver, and you don't have, there's not that you don't have 2 or 3 drivers trying to do the same thing that aren't maybe quite on the same page. And you've got the fuel savings, because it's
per
just
cubic metre of earth moved.
Metre of earth moved is a lot cheaper in fuel. You've got and that's the hard thing, because there's some people that you'd say that the D11, it uses 1,000 litres a day, or whatever it is, 1,200 litres a day, and people just get scared,
yep.
and which is understandable. Like, that's a lot of fuel, but you're like, well, you're pushing between 6, 8, sometimes 10 times the amount of a D6.
Well, I reckon you need a machine that uses the most amount of fuel that you can buy.
Because most machines are within a certain percentage of efficiency. It's the same with headers. It's the same with tractors. Like that, a good example is the Challenger is about 300 horsepower roughly, and the Steiger is about 550. So if you run that Steiger at the equivalent of 300 horsepower, it uses about the same as what the Cat does, flat out.
And it's doing it easy.
So you're generally speaking, you use what your how much load it's under.
But the remit for Tiny One was, we went down to have a look at it. We took some experts with us to get an assessment. I said, we need this machine. We need to get 1,000 hours out of it at least, or we can't. It's no good. 1,000 hours gives us our money back, but it's only just our money back. So, and most people thought that we had at least 2,000 or 3,000 hours left in it when we got it, and I think up until recently it had done over 4,000.
I think it's about 4. I think I have to check with Phil. Maybe 3.
Be over 4.
Nearly 4.
Be over 4, I think. Yep.
And but that's been, and the other reason for it too is you don't want to be on a D6 or D8 for months and months and months of the year. And we just did the video of starting it up for the first time in 5 months, and there's a couple of people like, why would it be sitting that long? It needs to earn money. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true, but the whole reason of buying a big dozer is so you're not on it all year round. You can get the work done, and you can do a 3-week stint on the dozer, hit it hard, and you've done the equivalent of 3-4 month work on a smaller machine.
And a D9 at the time was 450,000. This one was 200. So if you're paying $1 a kilo for your D9 of steel, you're paying 25 cents for your D11. And
that was it too. Like, to get a good, and when you step into that mining, the more mining orientated stuff, they're built to last. Like that Tiny One had done 35,000 frame hours. I think Tiny Two was 50-something thousand frame hours.
Yep.
And that, whereas if you get your D8s and D9s, it's a little bit, maybe not the D9, but probably definitely the D8. It's more lighter duty. You're probably not going to expect that.
But Caterpillar stuff, particularly of that era, had the amazing ability to carry injuries and keep going.
And that's we've been very
blessed,
surprised. Yeah, just how little it costs. Like you automatically think, oh, you have a breakdown, it's going to cost $100,000. Yeah, some things, but it's cheaper to service the D11 than it is the Steiger. Your fuel filters are a lot cheaper. Everything's a lot cheaper. Obviously, the oil amounts are different, but if you're just doing a simple service, it's cheaper.
But as I recall, the main motivation was, to me, we were a family operation. I had my boys there, and I didn't want us giving each other the sack as the drought bit in. I said, well, we're either going to survive together or we're going down together. We're not throwing anyone out of the boat. So we need to have something we can do and be active and productive and add value to our land, even if we're borrowing the money to do it. But to me, it was just not... How can you say to your boy, well, you can go back onto the tools because we can't... There's not enough work, or, you know, I didn't even think seriously about that. I just thought it's not going to happen.
And it could have all gone really wrong.
Yeah.
It could have.
But they would have been okay too. Like,
no, that's right.
That wouldn't have been a disaster.
So, steering back...
Yeah.
That was impressive. That was my fault, that one.
Yeah. There's two of us, though.
So, steering back, we were talking about nutrients in the soil here and not wanting to go... didn't want to slow death with the way things were done, where people were saying you didn't have to put fertiliser down, basically.
Yeah.
And then so you decided that you would start that investing in the fertiliser to slowly build up the reserves of nutrients. And was it straight away you saw a result, or was it maybe 2, 3, 4 years, or what?
Am I allowed to go back a little bit from the power planter? We had that for 5 years, and I knew that we needed to do something. This is 85, and in early 86, I went and ordered, it was bag manure then, or Starter Z or Starter K or whatever it was then. It was about 18, 16 of phosphorus and a little bit of nitrogen, but it was a starter fertiliser. And I had a flat top semi come and drop that off. Brad was so young, he was up the top of the headboard and he fell. He tumbled and hit his head on the fuel tank as he went down, landed on his back. He was pretty doughy for a while.
Yeah, that explains a fair bit, eh?
It does, doesn't it? I think we've got to be more forgiving of him.
Yeah.
But
I was probably dropped too.
But we didn't have a plan, any way of putting it out, because these power planters wouldn't do it. So I don't know, like, you can call it fortune, you can call it luck, you can call it whatever. I think it was divine providence. One of the local salesmen from the local dealership came out and we're talking about stuff, and, you know, we'd need a planter, we don't know what we're going to do. I'd organised with a neighbour maybe to use his old gyral planters that were the old combine type. So we had that roughly in mind. But this guy came around, I think it was in April, and he said, yeah. We said, look, we do need something to put out this fertiliser with. It's sitting in the shed. We've got no way of really doing it ourselves. He said, well, what you need is one of these. I said, yeah, that would be good. And I said it would fit with our tractor, the 4480, about 120 horsepower tractor. So I said, oh, well. I said, but that's a bit unfortunate. I said, what's the date before it can be ready? It was 3 or 4 months. I said, oh, well, that answers that, doesn't it? And he stopped and he said, hang on, we've got a guy out north of Moree that won't need his for a month or two. We could let you have his and get it early, and let him get yours, which is later. That would be an answer to prayer. And that's what happened. And that started, that first year we put on 50 kilograms to the hectare of a starter fertiliser. We did it in a little paddock, and we just put different rates. You know, it was only 10-acre paddock, but we went round and round. Our background levels of N and P were 7 parts per million, or 7 kilograms of available, and 8. So they were really, really depleted. We saw it.
P is phosphorus,
yeah,
isn't it?
And N was lower than P. There's 7, and we thought, wow. So those trials were obvious in the paddock. You know, the moment it popped out of the ground, some runs were really bright green. So I just kept adding. I think the next year we put 100 kilograms on, and then we could see that it was more than, we weren't getting the extra bang for the buck. So we then concentrated on nitrogen. So we put 50 kilos of nitrogen on, maybe that year. Because it did happen quickly. I wasn't a slow learner. And then the following year we put 100, and then I think we put 200 on. We jumped fairly quickly, so that was pretty close to 90 available units or kilograms to the actual N to the hectare, and our yields just went up like a rocket. It was so much fun, you know. And we had harvesters, combines if you like, that had about 100 horsepower, 5 tonne an hour. That made it frustrating.
Yeah.
You know, 4 tonne of the hectare plus, and you're grinding away through it.
Which it's just mentally, because it's like you're still getting a 5 tonne an hour, whether it's a heavy or light crop, but you're going slow.
It was a wonderful feeling. Yeah, they were good times to see that response, and it surprised a lot of people. Like, you know, people are watching over the fence and seeing what happens. And I figured back then that we were getting $2.50 back for every dollar we spent in fertiliser, and I'm not sure. I think it's probably, might even be better than that now. So,
but there's a point. Obviously, you can't just keep whacking it on. So you
400 kilos. 400 kilos is too much.
I was going to say, I bet you found out what too much was.
Well, it didn't kill it. It just didn't.
Yeah,
there was no benefit.
But
when we first moved to gas, we moved to gas in '98. I think it was '98.
So that's the anhydrous ammonia.
Anhydrous, and so then. I started off with 100, 200, 300, 400 kilograms because you just wind the knob up, and that was so cool.
Yes.
But we've settled, roughly now we've settled on, I think the boys are still on that money as around about a standard rate of 100 kilograms of N as your base rate. And yes, darling, we've got to go to town.
We're going to have to wrap up. Hurry up.
No, let me finish this thought. Where was I?
I can't remember.
So there, and now I think roughly it's, if you take 5 tonne of the hectare of wheat off, you've used 100 kilograms of N. So replace what you've taken off plus 10%. So you want to be a little bit over what you've removed rather than under, because under is so expensive. If you miss out on just a little bit of lost yield, you don't need much over to pick up and alter your profit margin, your profit line enormously. So that's my, probably I'm a bit,
eccentric.
Have a go, you know, like, don't die wondering. That's what
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I think we've covered many a topic there, haven't we? We probably haven't delved into anything in particularly well, but I think we covered a broad range.
There were a few things came to mind as we were talking.
But hey, the beauty is we can wander off in a future podcast and touch base back.
and nobody has to know about it. No. If we don't.
Exactly. No, exactly. Oh, I think, what are we at? We're at probably nearly that, about 40 minutes or so. So I think that'll do. We'll keep them wanting less.
And my child bride needs to go to town, and we've had 40 mil of rain overnight, and the roads are rubbish. And she doesn't like driving on those roads. So
understandably, none of us really do when they're that bad.
So.
All right, well, thank you.
Very good.
We'll see if we can rope anyone else in for next time, eh?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Catches.